Hey, we're going to pick up where we left off last week. You're like, left off? We didn't leave anything off, did we? Well, actually, yeah, we're doing this little series called Hungry, and we started off with Jesus giving a parable to the masses and then not explaining it. You remember that part? And it turns out this is what Jesus would do. So remember, Jesus is kicking off his ministry. He's getting a ton of attention, and he's sitting or standing or both in a boat on a beach, and he's got what could be thousands of people gathered on a beach all there to listen, and his students are so ready to start getting everybody on board for this new kingdom that they believe Jesus is going to become the king of. And so he's got this huge opportunity, and he just tells one metaphor after another metaphor after another metaphor and explains nothing. Remember that part? And then, of course, his guys are like, why do you do that? Why did you just wasted, why? And he says, you have to be hungry enough to leave the crowd if you want to understand. You have to be hungry enough to chase me, and you have to be open enough to hear what I would tell you. And if you're not ready to leave the crowd, you're not ready. The boundaries of this new kingdom are going to be hunger-based. Hunger-based. I feel like a normal person, which I think you probably are, you're like, wait, what? What? That's not how kingdoms work, right? Kingdoms have lines. You're either in or out. And he's just teaching them through this whole thing that the boundaries of this kingdom are going to be hunger-based, not geography-based, not nationality-based, race-based, heritage-based, like so many other boundaries are. This is going to be different. Now, if you're a normal person, which I already told you, you probably are normal. You're like, well, maybe not the person I came with. But, sometimes you're hungry, sometimes you're not. Am I not? Like sometimes I'm not really hungry, but sometimes I could eat. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I'm not just hungry all the time. That's not how I operate. So it's hard for me to wrap my mind around being hungry for God and hungry for righteousness and all this stuff. And so Jesus, knowing that this works different, is warning these guys, look, this is going to go a little differently. There are some things that you need to prepare yourself for. There are some things that you need to see in other people as they unfold. And I'm just getting you ready. So I'm going to explain this parable to you. And it's this farmer throwing the seed out on the tilled up dirt. Remember that thing? You're like, wait a minute, I didn't read that last week like I was supposed to. Or this week. Well, let me sum it up for you. Farmer goes out and he's throwing seed because that's how they did it. And some would fall on places that had been, stomped on already a bunch of times, so the seed doesn't go down in very much. It just sits on the top. And of course, birds swoop in and eat it because that's what birds do. And some of it falls in places that the dirt is shallow because the stone isn't very far down, so that the plants never get any roots, and they wither up when the sun comes out, and they die off. You've probably seen it in a cornfield somewhere driving around New York. There are other places where seed falls in pretty good dirt, but the weeds grow up around it. There's just a ton of weed seed in the dirt already. It was just there. And so they grow up and choke out what was going to be. And of course, finally, there is some seed that goes in good places, and it just grows up, and it yields, and it's doing what it was supposed to do. Jesus says, listen then to what the parable of the sower means. Now here's the fun part. He's going to talk about 4 different people. And even if you're like, man, that guy is the most boring person I've ever listened to, or I don't even want to be here. How did I end up in church today anyway? Listen, this will be a fun little challenge for you. Everybody in the room is one of those 4 people. So your challenge today is just figure out which one you think you are. Won't that be fun? Thank you. But seriously, come on, it'll be a challenge. So he says this, when anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path. Matthew 13:19. In other words, some people are going to hear some of this Jesus stuff, but they're just not going to be hungry. There's not going to be anything in them that rises up and says, I got to go figure out what that really is about. I got to figure out what it means. Somebody said this to me. What does it mean? And, go find yourself a New Testament and read for yourself and look for interpretation or ask people. They're just not going to do it. Why? Because they're not hungry for that. For whatever reason, that's just not where they are right now. So, nothing. Yet. Then he says, the one who received the seed that fell on the rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. Just like there will be people who get a taste of what Jesus is about and don't do anything with it, there will be people who get a taste and say, yeah, I want some of that. I do. They have enough hunger to say yes and eat something. They buy in. They chase just enough to understand. But there's not quite enough hunger to set roots. It's a little bit like a guy goes and asks a young lady to marry him. Hey, you want to get married? We've been friends a while now. This might work, right? So they get married, and they go down and they have the ceremony someplace, and then they go back to doing what they were doing before. They just don't make any plans, right? She goes back to her apartment, he goes back to his. They don't combine their finances. They don't start making plans for the future. They don't start, working on who's going to be doing what for work. They don't do any of that stuff. They just go back to doing what they were doing before. Now, here's the problem with that. See, they took the first step, but not the second or the third or the fourth. And so the relationship is so weak because they never work through anything together. They never have to communicate about anything important. They never make any decisions together. They never, have an argument and then recover. They don't do those things the way that they might if they were committed to setting roots together. And so it takes almost nothing to blast that relationship apart. The first little bit of trouble comes along, I'm done with you. You let your mom talk to me like that, 2 different times. We're it. I'm out, right? 2 years goes by. That's the second time you forgot my birthday. I think we're done here. Because there's no root. There's no relationship that they've worked on together. Jesus is saying that's how it is. You may think that's ridiculous, but people do this in faith all the time. They have just enough hunger to make a commitment, to start, but not enough to set roots. And so when a little bit of trouble or maybe a lot of trouble comes along, they're just, confused. Like, wait a minute, I don't understand why this is going on. Like, how come, this doesn't make any sense. How come God didn't stop this? How come? Just a little bit of stress, a little misunderstanding, a disappointment, and it's just, I'm confused, I quit. I tried that, it didn't work. It didn't work for me. Spoke up, got punished for it, never doing that again. Prayed, didn't get it, I don't see the point. Done. Had they set root, had they made themselves available to actually be taught by Jesus as the Lord, not just to say yes to Jesus, it might be different. But they weren't in that place at that time. That's not to say they'll always be there, but that's just not where they were in that moment. You might be there. You might be close to there. You might have joined the team at some time. And you're like, you know what? A bunch of stuff happened. I didn't see that coming. I don't know why it was happening. And it's just, I just did some other stuff for a while. I kind of walked off the field and tried some other things. I mean, people do that. This is no judgment against you. Don't take it that way. It's just a real circumstance. Then there's this person. He says, the one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. This is a hungry person. This is a hungrier person than the person before. They've actually done some things, like good things. They've set some root. They've learned some of what Jesus has taught, and they're maybe still learning, or they've gotten a place in the church. They've gotten a start. But he says that something happens to them, and it's not trouble. Like trouble stalls a lot of people out. Disappointments, sadness, grief, loss, all that stuff can slow people down for a while. This isn't that thing. This is about competition. You can be a hungry person, but have multiple things competing for your hunger. And according to Jesus, the number one competitor to your faith is your hunger for what you'll have. Stuff. Accumulating. Comfort. The things you want, the places you want to be. Those kinds of things are a competitor to your faith. The deceitfulness of, look, it's just stuff. I'm smarter than cars. I can't be tricked by dollar bills. I'm not. What do you think I am? You need to listen, though. It's not about the stuff that deceives us. It's about the desires deceiving us, our own desires from inside. Playing little tricks. It's kind of like growing a garden. You ever grow a garden? Raise your hand quick. If you ever actually grown a garden, come on, admit it. Now, the reason you're a little ashamed is because you weren't very good at it, right? Like you tried it once, and then, Let me tell you about what happened if it didn't work out, okay? This is what happened. You tell me if I'm wrong. You got the seeds started in the ground. Did you get that far? Some of you did not. That's okay. All right. I got some dirt turned up, but man, that was a lot of work. I sweat a little. I went back inside. Okay, I get it. You get your seeds started in the ground. Okay, I'll finish it up for you. Other things, guess what, get started too. Isn't that funny? There's always some other stuff in there, and you didn't have to put it there. It was. And it got started, and it's weed seeds. Like, what is a weed anyway? What class of... It's a plant that you do not want. And so it starts growing. And if you're kind of a hippie about it, which some of you probably were, right? You just let it grow up, right? It just starts going, and you're like, wow, that's interesting. I wonder what that will turn into. That's green, it's kind of pretty. I think I'll leave it there, right? So, as long as the stuff you put in the ground yourself is started, you think, well, it's going all right. Maybe you water it. Maybe God waters it. Maybe the fertilizer's already in the soil. You put it there, whatever. And so all the stuff is just growing up beautifully in harmony. You think, oh, what a beautiful picture. Maybe it's just you're lazy. Listen, honestly, some of you, all right, let's get real. You were lazy. You didn't want to pull the weeds. Nobody wants to pull the weeds because it's hot when stuff is supposed to be growing, right? Who put this together? God did. So, listen, you leave it go. And some of those weed seeds, I'm telling you what, they are so impressive. They're like, wow, I can't believe I didn't plant this on purpose. This is so amazing. And back home in Rodman, we have these things, we call them bull thistles, right? It's amazing. This thing grows so fast. It starts with nothing. It's got these little prickers all over it. It grows to be like 8 feet tall. Wow, does it grow. It's amazing. And it puts out these pretty pink flowers, and then they turn in. It gets to the end of the season, and this is what happens. They go to seed, and those little flowers burst open, and all these little white parachute things go with the seeds, and they fly all over the place, and sometimes the prickers, the little balls of death, the little evil things, they fall off, and they get stuck on people, and they carry them around. And here's what happens. That thing dies. And you go, wow, that thing is really ugly. I can't believe I let that thing grow there. And at the end, you have nothing. You have nothing. Because that's all that thing does. And then you looked at the plant. Now, here's the tricky part. Here's the tricky part. The plants that you planted are still there, but they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. The whole time you're thinking, I'm going to get a squash out of this thing. It's going to be great. Hanging on, hoping for the best. And you get to the end and there's no squash. Because that thing absorbed most of what that little plant needed in order to flourish and do what it was always made to do. That's gardening 101. And that'll preach. That'll preach. Because in our spiritual lives as Americans, this is very, very relevant to us. We have so many options. We have so much ability. We have so many resources. Like, I don't have resources. You just don't have the resources you wish you had, okay? We have so much available to us here, and we can do so many things. And what happens is we find ourselves doing so many things that are interesting. Like, wow, I didn't see that. I'm going to jump into that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to go after that. That looks good. I want that. And we don't make first our faith. The thing about faith you need to understand is faith only grows when it's in first place. You've got to manage it. You've got to manage your hunger. Because other things will compete to fill the hunger, the drive that you have as a wonderfully created human being. You've got all this drive. Other things want that. They pull on it. Oh, wouldn't you love to be this? Wouldn't you love to have this? Wouldn't you love? Well, maybe I would. But faith has to be in first place. And that means you've got to learn to pull weeds in your life. Like some of them are so pretty. Yeah, but it's competing. You can't let that do that. So hard. But you have to learn to weed. You have to learn. You have to learn to eat. Feed that hunger with good food. My wife told this story, I think it was a week or two ago, about how she made this wonderful salad. The micronutrients. I don't want to hear anything more about micronutrients for the rest of my life. I'm just like, just tell me it's good for me. I don't need to know all the stuff. Like, God made me be a rabbit. He'd given me bigger teeth. But, like, I don't care. But, I mean, I do, but you get it. And so, she left the salad in the truck, and when she went, and all these people are going by because she's a teacher. Oh, wouldn't you like a donut? Wouldn't you like a birthday cupcake? Wouldn't you love this? Wouldn't you love it? And of course, she just, and there's the snack machine. I don't want to go outside because this is right in front of me. Most of us spiritually don't have an issue of wanting to just eat out of the trash can or something like that. It's not like that. For most of us, okay? There are points in our lives where we kind of were eating out of the trash can, so to speak, because we just did things that were terribly destructive and pretended they weren't and tried them. But as you age and progress, it's not that I sit at home and think, man, what's in the garbage that I would like today? Here's my problem. Here's what happens to me if I'm not eating. It's because I don't manage my hunger very well. And what I'll do is I'll go to bed, make no plan for the next day, make no plan for breakfast, and I'll get up and I'll just be kind of, I don't really feel hungry, right now. So, but it's coming, right? You're going to be hungry. So what happens? Well, you get to like 9 o'clock, man, I'm hungry. I think I better stop at McDonald's. I think I'd better stop into Stewart's and pick up a candy bar, 2.5 king size, whatever that thing is they got now. Who needs 6 Reese's peanut butter cups? Turns out sometimes I do. And so you graze. That's what you do. That's what we as Americans do with our time and with our resources and efforts. We just graze as we feel led. Oh, that's interesting. I'll get into that. I'll do this. I'll chase that. And so it's the problem. The problem is we don't eat what we should eat, when we should eat it, and then when we get hungry, we just fill it with whatever. And another problem we have is, I don't know about you, but when I'm eating dinner, I don't just think about the dinner that I'm eating. My eye is on dessert. Right? Been that way ever since I was a kid. You know, it actually, for me as a kid, food was a means to get to dessert. It justified dessert. But you realize as you get older, you know, I could just eat dessert anytime I want. If you're not careful spiritually, your life becomes about the pursuit of dessert. And it will make you an ugly person. When you become, you know, absorbed with what you'll have and what you want and chase that first instead of letting God fill that in for you, you know, as He deems it appropriate, you chase that first, something kind of mean goes on. We all have the ability to chase who we should become, and we all have the ability to chase what we want. But if we do those things out of order, something very ugly happens. I'm ugly when I just chase what I want. If I'm not intentional, if I don't make God first in the number one slot, I get off track. I really do. I get so in the weeds of, oh, I would like that. I would want that. How can I get that? I just kind of lose myself a little bit, you know? Feed yourself good food. Manage your hunger. Now, Jesus gets to the end. I hope you read this far. He says, but the one who received the seed that fell on good soil is the one who hears the word and understands it. He produced a crop that yielded 100 or 60 or 30 times what was sown. That's the point of seed, right? You plant seed so you have more of what you're supposed to have, what you actually want, what it was made to become. All seed, get this, you go buy seeds, seed isn't meant to be seed. Seed is meant to become something more than what you see. And Jesus is saying to you right now through this, you guys have seed in you. You are made to become something more than what you already are because of that seed. If you're hungry enough to root, and you feed that hunger with good food, the right food, you'll become who you were made to be. It's like clockwork. You will become who you were made to be. You are becoming who you were made to be right now. Many of you, I don't know who is and who isn't. But if you're doing that, you're on the way. What does that mean? You know, it's hard to get inspired sometimes. It's easy to be inspired by something you can have. You know, I could look on Pinterest forever, right? Like, whoa, Pinterest. Who even knew? I don't know. How did I get started on Pinterest? Anyway, I'm a 39-year-old male. How did that happen? But I got started, and I look at all this stuff. I'm like, I like that, and I like that, and I like that, and I like that. Like, it's so easy because it's so easy to capture a vision, you know? Like, I was looking on eBay at cool cars. I don't want to tell you which one. I'm a little embarrassed, but it was more than I need to be spending. And I looked, and I'm like, oh, it's so amazing, right? I want that. It's harder to have a vision of who you'll become. It's hard. That's not something we think about very often. Who will I become? Who am I becoming? What kind of a person? We think about it sometimes for like 3 minutes because we go to a funeral or a memorial service. Isn't that funny? You go to a memorial service and all of a sudden you're asking yourself these deep questions like, wow, what would it be like if I died? What kind of thing would they say to sum up what kind of a person I was? And then you start thinking, they're not going to care what I had. They're not even going to care what I accomplished. They're not even going to care. I mean, sometime after the funeral, someone somewhere will probably be fighting over what you had, but they won't be thinking about you anymore. They'll just be thinking about what they want. Fun fact. Who will you become? Who are you becoming? And it's not that you don't care. You actually do care. As I say it, you're convicted. You're like, oh, I want to make sure I'm becoming. I want to become what God made me to be. I want to become the self-sacrificing reflection of my Creator. I want to be strong. I want to be unshakable. I want to have peace. I want to have all this joy that they talk about having. Compassion and kindness and generosity. That's what I want to become. I know I'm made to become that. The problem for everyone, whether you're on the hard path right now and you just, I don't really care, I'm not that hungry, whether you're kind of hungry, whether you used to be a little hungry, now you're not, whether you're hungry but you got all this competition vying for your attention, whether you're in good shape, everybody has to understand everybody's going to be hungry. For what you choose, but everybody's hungry. Everybody knows they're hungry. And it's hard to decide to take your mind off what I'll have long enough to work on who you'll become. But I'm telling you, you need to, oh man, if I could get this across. I don't know. Jesus, help. It's important to understand. If you are at work on who you will become through Christ Jesus, you don't have to think about what you'll have, because you'll have everything. You'll have it. So often we distrust. We're like, I could become everything I'm supposed to be, and then I've got to get this other thing. Right? Because why? Because I can't trust God enough so much to make sure that I'll have what I need to have in order to be happy, in order to be okay. And you look at the things that you'll have, and you're like, yeah, I want this. I want this great marriage. I want this. I want 8 smiling children that all praise my name. I want all these things. I want a nice, healthy nest egg waiting for me in retirement, which I want to retire at 48 and a half years old. Think about, if that's a challenge for you, don't raise your hand. I'll put it this way. Think about the things that you most want. Be honest with yourself. What are they? You better not say some of them out loud, I'm just saying. Okay? Because you're humans. What are they? Is it a place you want to go? Is it a lifestyle that you want? Is it a family situation? Is it a certain kind of a partner? What is it? Don't lie to me. I know you got them. Just consider for a moment, who came up with that stuff? Did you invent trees? Cut up and build beautiful houses? You ever drive by a really nice place that's like super well landscaped? You ever have that, oh, man, I would love that place. A lot of people have a place they would love to have. Look at the trees they picked. It's just amazing. Before you discovered that, God imagined it. Before some landscaper paid $1 bazillion, discovered that tree in the forest, God imagined that tree in the forest and came up with and said, that would be beautiful for people to look at. Think of that person, you got the hots for. Hopefully it's the person next to you, I don't know. But imagine that for a moment, that God actually drew up the blueprint for that person. Thinking, man, that'll be good. They'll look just this way. They'll just have this facial structure. And we'll put them together, and that'll be a good time, right? And God came up with that. We're talking about someone who has a really good imagination for comfort and pleasure and joy and fun and good things, right? We're not talking about some magistrate up in the top of the clouds someplace who has a gavel like, I want everybody to suffer and I don't like people and everybody should be grateful for, celery and should be grateful for celery, but I'm not. God came up with all that stuff. Maybe we should be so concerned with who we'll become and trust Him to believe that He will give good things in His time. And that whatever you think of eternity, whether it's, the angels and the white gowns or the choruses or whatever you think, you have to imagine that whatever He's got going on up there is going to be yet better than what you've got down here. Seek first the kingdom of God, Jesus said. And all these things will be given to you. He's in charge of all the things, too. I've preached long enough. I hope that you take that home with you today. I hope that you've considered where you are. And the one last thing I want to do is just give you a little bit of hope. I was talking to Pastor Mike earlier, and he's like, oh, so the sower of the seeds, you're going to you're going to do that thing today. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that thing today. He does his Pastor Mike thing. He tells me what the sermon's about before I tell it. It's like, it's the 4 heart conditions. I'm like, yep, it's the 4 heart conditions, yep. But he said something real good. He said, the one thing you need to remember is that God can change the soil. Oh. Maybe that's what you need today. Maybe that's what you need, is a little help changing the soil. A little help getting some of the weeds out of there. A little help with the confusion about trauma or pain or trouble that you've gone through. A little bit of help seeing why you should even listen to why. So that's what we're praying for this morning. And I'm going to get out of the way here because my wife has this song that she wanted to sing about becoming refined. And that is the process.